Welcome to the Future of Medicine podcast, presented by Predictiv, the first DNA-based digital twin to predict and prevent over 22,000 diseases.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Future of Medicine. In this podcast, we explore how technology and science are shaping the medicine of the future. From genomics to wearable devices, artificial intelligence to at-home diagnosis and treatments, our guests will share how they foresee the future and how they contribute to it. Today, I have the pleasure to have with me Dr. Jake Prigoff. Jake is a physician, survivor, and healthcare investor. After battling stage 4 lymphoma, Jake quickly moved toward the healthcare sphere as a speaker, advocate, and physician. He went to medical school at Mount Sinai in New York City and then followed that with training in general surgery at Columbia University Medical Center. Jake has since left clinical medicine in pursuit of a broader impact on the healthcare system through the healthcare industry. Jake currently serves as the Director of Research and Healthcare Lead at Gaingels, a diversity-focused investment group. So I invited today Jake to talk about his experience as a cancer survivor, a physician, and as an investor, particularly what he's looking at when sourcing biotech and health tech companies. Jake, welcome to the Future of Medicine. You have such an amazing experience on all sides of healthcare as a patient, physician, and investor. First of all, can you tell us more about your background and why you became a physician?
Sure. And thank you, Alex, for having me on. It's very exciting to be here. So my story kind of starts when I was, 15 years old. I was being raised to actually take over a family business. But when I was 15, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. I went through chemotherapy, I went through radiation therapy, and as you can imagine, that changes your life and it changes on your future career aspirations and how you want to impact the world. And so that was kind of the spark that led me to transition away from business and towards healthcare. And so I went into kind of the cancer research space, mostly as an advocate, raising awareness, raising funds for cancer research. With folks at Memorial Sloan Kettering, with folks at the SAS Foundation for Medical Research, a couple of other organizations. And then I decided to go to med school. So like you said, I went to med school at Mount Sinai in New York, and then over to Columbia for my training in surgery. But yeah, it really was my experience as a patient that led me to healthcare, and kind of fueled my desire to become a physician.
Well, that's always gets me very emotional when hearing such stories. So you battled that lymphoma when you were younger, when you were 15. How long did it take to get diagnosed?
That's a good question, Alex. My diagnosis was kind of drawn out. I first noticed symptoms about a year before I was diagnosed. And over the course of that year, I had noticed significant weight loss, some breathing difficulty, some other symptoms. And the physicians that, I saw thought that it could be a variety of things. And we went through a million different diagnostic tests, and we thought that I had asthma and allergies, anorexia, and eventually we realized that it was in fact the cancer that was causing this. And so after a year, I found myself in the hospital undergoing treatment for the lymphoma.
Oh. And we all know that the faster a condition is diagnosed, the higher the chances to survive are. Do you think that it could be today, it could be diagnosed faster, or would it be the same? And what would it take to diagnose faster? That kind of, because you went through all those diagnosis tests, what would it take to get the diagnosis faster?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I will say that I am incredibly lucky, and the innovation that happened within medicine before my diagnosis was key to my survival. I was diagnosed at such a late stage that I received very aggressive chemotherapy. And that chemotherapy was actually developed only a few years, and that protocol was developed only a few years before I was diagnosed. And so that new protocol, that new therapy has an extremely high cure rate, and I am lucky to have benefited from that research that went into that. As for the diagnosis and whether or not it could have been, whether I could have been diagnosed earlier, it's hard to say. But I will say that there are a lot of companies, a lot of diagnostic companies that are working on early diagnosis of cancer. And for me specifically, lymphoma being, kind of peripherally a blood cancer, I think it's possible that some of these early diagnostics in terms of identifying tumor markers with blood tests, it's certainly possible that at some point in the future that somebody suffering from the same thing that I suffered from would be diagnosed earlier in the course.
Well, thank you. So going back to what you do now, so you joined Gaingels a few years ago, which is an investment syndicate that seeks to influence social change through business by investing in the best companies that embrace diversity. My question would be, why did you become an investor, and why Gaingels?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. Thank you. I found Gaingels actually through a friend of mine who was an investor at the time and still is. And he brought me to a pitch night with Gaingels. This was a few years ago. And I met some of the folks within the organization, and I met some of the other investors within the network. And I loved the mission, and I loved the people. I loved what they were doing for diversity. As a gay man, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion within the venture space is really important to me. And as I grew, as my relationship grew within that organization, within Gaingels, my interest in healthcare and my interest in promoting diversity kind of merged into one. And about a year ago, I left clinical medicine and joined Gaingels full-time with the hopes of kind of marrying the two, being able to help the healthcare industry from the investor side, and also help push for diversity and equity within venture.
Okay, well, that's such a different venture and very complementary to what you were doing. So just about Gaingels, at what stage do you invest? What is the average amount of investment? What is the range of valuation? Just to give an idea of the type of investment you do.
Sure. So Gaingels is stage agnostic. We invest in companies that are very early stage, pre-seed stage, to companies that are about to IPO. So there's quite a range. We do, we invest only in venture-backed companies, and across the spectrum, across industries, across stages. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And as an investor, what is the first thing you look at when meeting an entrepreneur, when meeting a company? Is it the long-term potential, the social impact, the traction, the team, the patents? So what's really what brings you some interest into a company at first?
Sure. I think kind of the first thing that I notice is sometimes hard to identify, right? Because the first thing that I might notice is that I'm blown away by the founding team, or the first thing that I might notice is that they're solving a really complex clinical problem that interests me. I think for me, it's not necessarily so much about what's the first thing I notice, but my own personal investment thesis, kind of as a patient, as a doctor, is to find technologies that are going to impact patients, that are going to impact doctors. And this is particularly important to me because while I was in the hospital treating patients, while I was in the hospital as a patient, you notice that there's a lot of technology out there that people aren't necessarily using. And so it kind of begs the question, are we solving problems that aren't really problems? And so that's something that's important to me personally as an investor.
And so what's the one advice you would give to a health tech entrepreneur when meeting him or her?
I guess the advice as a clinician that I would give someone is to engage with clinicians early, engage with patients early. The last thing you want to do is spend millions of dollars on a new technology, a new device, and then find out that nobody's going to use it because nobody really thinks that you're solving a problem that they have. And so finding those pain points and doing a really thorough needs assessment on the problem that you're going after is vital. Because, in the end, if you're not going to change how people practice medicine, then whatever medical technology you're coming up with isn't going to get used.
And I guess you meet a lot of entrepreneurs, but also healthcare professionals, experts. How do you see today technology changing medicine?
Oh, I think the future of medicine is centered around technology. And we see it in our day-to-day lives, right? I don't go anywhere without my phone. Technology has really ingrained itself in everything that we do. And I think as an industry, healthcare can sometimes be slow on the uptake. And it's because doctors and scientists, just kind of as a product of who we are we're skeptical. And so we're not always the first ones to jump on a bandwagon when new technology arises, but slowly but surely it makes its way into medicine. And so I think in general, across a variety of industries within healthcare, technology is going to push healthcare forward in unimaginable ways. And
do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic had an impact? Did you see it as being kind of an accelerator? I mean, we all know the pandemic was really bad at global level, but from everything that is bad, you can get some good from it. Do you think that COVID-19 accelerated those changes, especially in the industry itself, more than the patients? Because the patients already had their phone, as you said, but on the other side, on the industry itself, do you think that that changed the mindsets?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really exciting thing for me is that COVID really pushed the boundaries on the relationships between clinicians and industry. During the initial spike in March of 2020 in New York City, I was working in the hospital, in the ICUs, on the floors, and even under the immense pressure and the immense workload that these clinicians were under, they were engaging with engineers and they were engaging with hospital leadership to create new devices and to create new protocols and to push the boundaries on what technology could do for our patients. And so it very much was a catalyst for those relationships. And I'm excited about those relationships continuing to grow and continuing to get clinicians embracing industry and embracing academic engineering as a collaborative effort to bring new things to the bedside. And so I think COVID really highlighted that and really catalyzed that for sure.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And what do you think today are the biggest challenges for hospitals, for clinicians to not just embrace that technology, but really push for it? I mean, really, or try to pull all that technology, because there are a lot of, you meet a lot of entrepreneurs. I have the chance also to be in that field and to meet so many entrepreneurs in biotech, in health tech. So very different technologies for treatments, diagnosis, everything. Going on the market is always difficult when going to hospitals, to physicians, because it might change the processes, it might change the way they work, which is valid for all industries, by the way. But what do you think today the biggest challenges for hospitals, clinicians are to prepare the future?
That is a difficult question. How
have very easy questions so far. So.
How can hospitals, how can clinicians prepare for the future? I don't know that I have a great answer to that, but what I will say, kind of in a similar vein, is that the uptake of new devices, new technology within healthcare can be slow. We are skeptics. It is what we are taught to do in medical school. It's what scientists are taught to do during their PhDs is okay, great, somebody's got a good idea, and they've got a plan on how they're going to address a problem, but we're not convinced until you prove it, right? And show me the science and show me the data. And that data takes a while to collect. And, so what clinicians, what hospitals can do to prepare for the future, I think it actually is a lot of what they have been doing, which is to remain skeptical, because in the end, what we want to do is we want to bring the best technologies to the bedside. And that skepticism is useful because we get to challenge people and we get to challenge entrepreneurs and we get to challenge engineers and scientists to build better products, to build better devices, to build better technologies. And so if we are going to be preparing for the future, then we need to do it kind of with a hefty dose of skepticism, but also keep our minds open.
So how do you were talking about the future of medicine and getting prepared for it. How do you envision it in 5, 10, 20 years? What will medicine, what will healthcare look like in that area 5, 10, 20 years? What will be the key changes, not just better treatments and better diagnosis, but in general, do you think that it will be a complete revolution, or do you think it will just evolve over time?
I don't know that there's going to be a complete revolution. I wish we could say that innovation moved that fast, but it doesn't. I think it will be a slow process over time, and we see it every day. But the way that I see the future of medicine is much more user-friendly. Right now, and it's nobody's fault, right? But right now, the healthcare industry is difficult to navigate for patients, and it's difficult to navigate for clinicians, and it's difficult to navigate for other healthcare workers. I think what technology can do is it can improve the user experience at every level. And the way that happens is through personalization, right? We can personalize things for patients. We could personalize things for doctors. We could personalize things for nurses, for engineers, for scientists, for industry. And as we continue to do that, and as technology, I think, allows us to do that, we'll start to shift towards a very different healthcare system.
Okay, and in that new healthcare system, how do you think the role of physicians will change and their relationship with patients?
My hope is that their relationship with patients will actually go back to what it was decades and decades ago, centuries ago, if you want to go back that far, where it's a much more personal experience. And we don't need to worry about taking the most accurate notes or typing on a computer or trying to figure out where in an EMR this data exists, because it's going to be right in front of us, and it's going to be automatically tracked, and it's going to be automatically logged. So as a physician, I can sit down and speak with a patient and actually have a conversation. And in the background, all of that data, all of that note writing, all of that documentation is just going to happen. So I hope
spending more time building the personal relationship with the patient, and less time writing down notes. And the daily activities of physicians, have changed quite a bit in the past few decades. And I say that as somebody who hasn't practiced for decades, but we know it to be true, right? We know that physicians more and more, and clinical providers more and more, are spending a lot of time documenting, or spending a lot of time chart checking. And I think if we can get to a system where a lot of that is taken away from the clinician, then they can focus on the patient, and focus on that relationship with the patient. Okay. Well, Jake, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your expertise with us. Once again, I was amazed by your experience, and that was such a pleasure to have you here today. Best of luck also for Gaingels and your portfolio companies. And thank you, everyone, for joining this podcast on the future of medicine, and see you next week.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
This was the Future of Medicine podcast, presented by Predictiv, the first DNA-based digital twin, to predict and prevent over 22,000 diseases. Learn more on www.predictivecare.com.